inescapable and deadly.
Which one? Which one? Which one? And they're coming your way now.
You said you were alone.
Sometimes the little animals come in and go all over the place. They're awfully naughty.
Dad, she's been in an asylum for 15 years. She must be cured.
She was a cannibal.
I'm sorry?
I can't put it more daintily than that, I'm afraid. The fact is, she ate people.
Oh, that woman has had enough of my time already. I'm not going to let her wreck my love life as well.
Oh, God, we went there last night. I hate that place.
What's that?
I'm not going to that gaff. I think I'll go home. I'll let you lift.
Do what you want, but don't hang around. The law's coming.
One look and I know it all.
And perhaps you'd like to tell me.
Perhaps you'd like to tell me. Perhaps I wouldn't. Delia, what have you been doing to them?
Hi, this is Larry Zerner from Friday the 13th, Part 3, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back. It's episode 272, and this time we're headed back to the shores of merry old England, to the mid-70s, for a frightfully good time with Pete Walker's proto-slasher nasty Frightmare. Not to be confused with the American Frightmare from 1981 or 82. Yeah, I think this is, am I right in thinking this is the first Pete Walker film we've covered? I think
it is.
Which is surprising. I think we probably, I'm sure his films came up quite a bit when we covered the top 3 of the 1970s on Patreon. But yeah, I can't remember who wrote in, and so apologies for that, but suggesting we cover Frightmare, and I'm surprised we hadn't covered it because it's one of my favourite British horror movies from the 1970s, and obviously it remains to be seen if it is a hit with you guys as well, although I suspect it might be. But anyway, before we get on to the grisly business of Frightmare, how are we doing this fine morning? Erik?
Yes, I'm looking forward to running with this title, Pete Walker.
Oh dear. You only did that because you know that my computer's broken, so I can't get to the soundboard and make sort of disparaging sound effects to your bad comments.
I think
bad jokes.
You dirty nunsucker.
That sums up my feelings.
I could be an asshole and add them in post.
Yeah, well, that'd be good, actually, if you wouldn't mind. Hopefully things will be back to normal next week when I hopefully have a new computer. But anyway, we're muddling through. So, well, Joseph, how are you doing?
Hey,
is that the start of a Pixie song, isn't it?
Well, it's also where she hides all the corpses in this film.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true indeed. So, yeah. And Nathan, have you ever played with a tarot set?
No. When I worked in a video store, though, a guy did come into the video store once and handed us all these tarot cards, and he's like, do me a favor and just throw these away.
Ooh.
How odd.
Yeah, it was a very odd situation. We always kind of tried to guess like what it was about. Like, did he have a bad experience? Did they belong to someone and he was tired of it?
Why a video store? Why would you want to throw them away at the video store?
It was just weird. Like, he came in and he had them in his hand and just like kind of gave it to us. And then, yeah, just said, will you throw these away? It was very odd.
We won't take that comment out of context.
Not at all. I was just giggling to myself here. He had it in his hand and he gave it to us.
Yes.
Oh, well, how dare you all.
So, yeah, I told you, I'm sure I've mentioned that story, haven't I? That used to, my mum used to have, we were talking about tarots because they play quite heavily in the Frightmare, which we'll get onto later. But I told you all that my mum had a pack of tarot back when we were kids, and I used to read the tarot for my younger brother and sister. So I'd always get Death, the Hanging Man, and all the nasty ones on top, and I'd always read and tell them they'd be dead by next week.
What a lovely brother. You're a selfish relative.
I know. But they're still around, so it didn't work.
It reminds me of, and I know that Joe and maybe Erik too will know this, but The Simpsons, when Lisa goes to the tarot woman and she's turning them over, and like one of them is the happy squirrel, and she's like, the happy squirrel.
And she just specialized in telling fortunes where people get jerked around.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, we'll be talking more tarot later, and obviously covering on the main feature is Pete Walker's Frightmare, as I've already said about 1,000 times. But before we get onto that, let's have a little chat about what we've been watching in the last couple of weeks since we last recorded. So, Erik, anything you want to tell us about?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, okay.
Really, no. I've had no time to watch anything apart from podcast movies.
Okay, well, fair enough. Nathan, how about you?
Well, I watched two things. The first one was a rewatch. I just happened to want to rewatch Suspiria, so I rewatched it last night, and I quite enjoyed it.
Well, that's kind of fitting, Nathan, because if I remember correctly, you weren't on our Suspiria episode.
Was I not?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, but anyway, yeah, so I highly enjoy Suspiria. It's not quite my favorite Argento movie, but it's definitely in the top, like 5, maybe top 3. I'd have to sit down and actually think about it, but yeah, great film. I love the scene where they're all like, because the maggots have come down onto them, and they end up having to all room together in a room. Like a gym or something. I don't know, that they're all rooming together. And when they wake up in the middle of the night and behind the curtain, they can hear the breathing of, was it Helena Marcus? I thought that was a really good scene. Very creepy, eerie. And the other thing I watched, since we're on this Pete Walker, I was kind of on a Pete Walker kick when I watched Frightmare. I wanted to watch something else, so I watched The Confessional. I think it's AKA The Confessional Murders, where it's Pete Walker's movie about the killer priest who is like killing the parishioners of his church. And I quite liked it. I thought the ending to it, and I don't want to spoil it, but I thought the ending to it was phenomenal. Like, it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but it really works for the movie, in my opinion. So, yeah, I loved it too, and I'm sure that we'll probably cover it at some point. So I won't go too far into detail, except to say that I really enjoyed it as well.
Was it a first-time watch for you, The Confessional Murders?
I feel like I had seen it before, but I didn't remember anything about it. So if that's the case, then it was like a first-time watch for me.
Cool. Okay. And of course, we won't. Obviously, we'll talk a bit more about some of the other movies, considering we haven't. Because there's a list. There's a Flesh and Blood show, isn't there, which is very much like a proto slasher, the one with the killer actor on the end of the pier bumping off ladies with not many clothes on. Then obviously, House of Mortal Sin isn't really a slasher movie at all, but obviously Frightmare, then The Confessional Murders, Schizo, and The Comeback are all kind of prime for us to cover at some point, I would have thought.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Well, did he say? Oh, you did say that was just your other one you saw?
Yeah, that was my other one.
Okay. And Joseph, am I right in thinking you caught up with a film that we'd seen last time?
Yeah, I actually saw 2 films this week too. The first being Barbarian, after Justin and Eric's glowing recommendations on the open house episode. But I think I disliked this more than you two. The writing is consistently frustrating and poor. It leans heavily on both that disbelieving idiot trope and kind of a fractured back and forth narrative device that I think it raises more questions than it answers. I won't go over too much of the setup except to say it involves an Airbnb that isn't what it seems. But I will say that the characters, they frequently make questionable decisions in order to drive the plot, and I hate that. I hate that in movies. It really drives me crazy. It's lazy. It's pretty typical in horror films, sure, but I felt that Barbarian didn't provide enough context with the plot to justify the characters' actions, and frankly, I just didn't find the characters interesting or very likable. The world building and the would-be character pathos just felt sloppy to me. The central threat, which I won't spoil, that was admittedly freaky stuff and frankly belongs in a better movie. There's some great cinematography here, and the build up to that first reveal I'm trying not to spoil it too much. The first reveal in the basement is moderately engaging, but once it becomes clear that there is indeed a threat, I I don't know. It just felt very Emperor's New Clothes, ending in a big fat nothing of a closer. I mean, it's certainly watchable, but yeah, you guys were right on the money saying it was just way overhyped and way too long at nearly 2 hours. So I don't get the hype for Barbarian. I didn't enjoy it all that much.
Okay. Well, Nathan, have you seen it yet?
Yeah, actually, it was part of my recently seen in the open house episode as well.
Oh, it was. Okay, so apologies. But, well, thank you, Joseph. Anything else?
Yeah, the other movie I saw, and I know Erik has seen this, and it's one that's easily head and shoulders above Barbarian, and that's Pearl, the prequel to X. Up until X, I found Ty West films to be sort of great to look at, but not very engaging. But with X, and especially Pearl, we have a rich, colorful world centering around a very sympathetic centerpiece in the character of Pearl. She performs the standard duties of a slasher movie villain, but she's also extremely sympathetic. And as played by Mia Goth, she's just so much fun to watch, and her performance was, a powerhouse. I love the Technicolor look to the film too. It's so vibrant, and it has that kind of, Dorothy discovering Oz, all of the Wizard of Oz kind of feel to it. I also didn't mind that the slasher stuff hits kind of late into the film, unlike X, as they spend, I think they spend just the right amount of time and not a second more on painting a really vivid picture of the Pearl character just before she descends into complete madness and resorts to, murdering those who see the cracks in her facade, like friends and family like that. And even though we know what becomes of Pearl with this being a prequel, there's still some suspense and who will discover her true psyche and how they'll be punished, quote unquote, for it. So yeah, I mean, I loved Pearl, maybe even more than X, though I admit it's a very close call for me. I can't wait to see Maxine, with the triple X's in the name, which I believe to be set, I think it's set in 1985 or 1986. And I think Ty West has proven himself, both with X and Pearl, that he might be second to none and kind of capturing a specific time period. And if Maxine is even half as good as the two films before it, I mean, we're possibly looking at a contender for greatest horror trilogy of all time. I mean, I've enjoyed X and Pearl that much, so leading up to Maxine, so I'm very hopeful for Maxine. But yeah, thumbs way up for me for Pearl. I loved it.
Excellent. I am still waiting to watch X, and then I'll watch Pearl shortly after. But you were glowing about Pearl, weren't you, Erik?
Yes, I loved it, and like Joseph, Ty West for me was like, I admired his work. I thought it was possibly a tad too slow for my liking, but then along comes X, and suddenly I'm like, whoa, this is really good. And then Pearl just blew me away. It was amazing. Did you love that final shot that plays over the end credits, Joseph?
Yes, I mean, and the way they kind of drag it out, and you're like, what does this mean?
That is, it's just odd, but really utterly fantastic.
It's very affecting final shot.
Yeah. Yeah, huge thumbs up. I'm going to go back now and revisit like House of the Devil and The Innkeepers and that, because they're films that I kind of liked, but probably had no urge to rewatch. But I do now after, the double whammy of X and Pearl.
Excellent. And Nathan, what about you? Have you seen either of those?
Well, I saw X and I loved it. I thought it was great. And I really, really want to watch Pearl. I haven't had a chance to yet. But I mean, so far, it just seems like all the reviews for it have been glowing. So I don't see how I won't like it.
Yeah, if X is, I mean, I found X to be sort of like Eaten Alive. And I think Pearl is kind of like Axe, the film we covered not too long ago, but obviously better.
It does. I'd never thought of that comparison, but it does have kind of an Axe type backdrop to it. But the vibe I got most from Pearl, apart from obviously the 1940s Technicolor look, was Carrie. I thought Pearl, the character Pearl, had that sympathy about her, much like Carrie.
Yeah.
It might be just the accent, because she has the same sort of southern accent as Sissy Spacek, but maybe that's what was informing that opinion.
Yeah, I mean, she's doing these terrible things, and I think she has her reasons for it, because she feels if anyone discovers who she really is, she won't amount to anything in the world. But at the same time, she's so sympathetic, and I love that actress. She's phenomenal.
Excellent. Well, I shall look forward to those. So,
what's the actress's name, Justin?
Mia Goth.
Spoiled.
So, anyway, anything else, Joseph?
No, that's it for this week.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll rattle through a few ones I've seen. You saw Smile, didn't you, Erik?
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah, so I finally caught up with that, and I really enjoyed it as well. I thought it was, I think it's the biggest horror film of this year as far as kind of box office. I think it's going to make something like $200 million or over $200 million at the international box office. I mean, at its heart, I mean, it really is a kind of retooling of The Grudge and The Ring, kind of ideas of kind of curse being passed on from person to person. But it's done in such a entertaining way, and it's genuinely. I found it kind of genuinely creepy, and had some great kind of. It's definitely influenced, I'd say, by those kind of Asian horror movies of the late '90s, early 2000s, where some like a film like The Eye or The Ring or Ringu or any of those kind of movies, The Grudge, but it has those kind of moments of kind of the kind of sheer terror that you kind of got in some of those kind of Japanese and other Asian horror movies at the time. I found it genuinely creepy, but also a lot of fun as well. And it has talking of kind of wow endings, it definitely has a kind of real kind of out there ending. But I really liked it. So it's good to recommend, Erik. I won't give anything else away about it because it's probably don't. It's best to go into it kind of blind, I kind of guess. But Nathan, have you caught that with Smile yet?
No, I have not, and I definitely want to, because especially after what you guys have said about it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. But just like with Barbarian, I'm purposely not reading anything about it because I kind of just want to go in blind.
Yeah, for me, the best scare in Smile was given away in the trailer.
Right. I don't think I saw. Maybe I did catch the trailer a while back, but I didn't remember the trailer very well. So I just thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was very effective. But and Joseph, I know you've not caught up with that one yet.
No, but everything I've been reading about it, like everyone's saying it's not that great. So maybe when I actually go watch it, I'll actually enjoy it. You know, I did read a lot of the stuff on Barbarian, so there was some hype behind that. But I'm going to stop where I'm at right now with Smile and just go watch it as it is.
Okay, well, that sounds good. A couple of others which are more off the radar. One we watched last night was a British film called All My Friends Hate Me, which no, it's not the story of Erik Frelfall, but
I knew you'd say that.
Yeah, well, I kind of walked into that myself. But anyway, this is a kind of horror comedy that was recommended to me by a Facebook friend called, funnily enough, called Erik, who he's writes for the New York Times, and he says it's one of his top 5 streaming movies at the moment, horror movies to sort of check out. And the basic premise is this guy who's just turned 31 goes to his friend's country estate for a reunion. It's his birthday, a reunion after they haven't seen each other. His friends haven't seen each other for about 5 years. So there's a group of his friends from university at this big country pile. And when he gets there, everything feels off. They're all kind of friendly but passive aggressive. And he has a run in with this kind of scary man in this car who chases him, and it's one of those films where you don't know what's going on, if it's a joke or if it's he's genuinely in danger or he's paranoid. It's kind of one of those films that plays through. So it's kind of run through with a kind of a dark sense of humour as well. And I quite enjoyed it. It's not fantastic. It's not. I wouldn't definitely recommend. But have any of you guys seen that or even heard of it?
I think I've heard of it. It's on one of the streaming platforms. I think I've seen. But I didn't know anything about it, so sounds good. Sounds like The Game or something.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. It's kind of like one of those. It's kind of. It sounds terribly pretentious when I say it's a bit like Kafkaesque, but that kind of. He doesn't know what's going on, if he's really all in his head or if it's there's a conspiracy out to get him, or it plays to that quite well. So the other one I saw, which again, it's another one of those films that you really need to go into blind, so I won't give much away, is Soft and Quiet, which is quite a kind of shocking kind of movie in a lot of ways. And the only thing I'll say is the basic premise is it's a primary school teacher attends a meeting in a church with a group of other women to start setting up a group. And things go very, very, very badly wrong in lots of different ways. I won't give anything else away, but the only other thing I'll say about it is that it's actually, it purports, the whole film plays in real time. So it's all in one continuous shot, the whole 90 minutes. Now, whether or not it really was done in one continuous shot is probably unlikely, but it's certainly filmed to make it look like it is, which is quite an interesting way to kind of take you on this kind of journey with these kind of characters who I won't give anything else away about it. It has a great setup and a good sort of quite very disturbing middle section. It kind of goes off the rails a little bit towards the end, I thought, because there's this. I don't know if you guys find this with like quite a lot of modern horror movies, or even something like House of the Dragon, where everything's shot in complete pitch black. It's this kind of modern thing, isn't it? I found that in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies as well, which there's another film I watched recently, which I won't talk about now because I've already rabbited on too much. But I've got a written review for Hysteria Lives, which I'm going to post on my computers when I've got to a working computer again. But I found that problem with that as well, that much of the movie was shot in almost near darkness. I find it quite frustrating to be watching a screen. It takes me back to those days of the trying to watch E.T. on a bootleg VHS copy that has been copied 150 times. All you can see is like what looks like a fuzzy potato walking across the screen. So I don't know what it is about that. It's just turn on a light, for fuck's sake. Anyway, so any of you guys Soft and Quiet? Is that one that's on your radars?
That's another one I've never heard of.
Never heard of that one.
Never heard of it.
I'd be interested to see what you think of it, because the actual premise of it, the driving force behind what's going on in the film is very relevant to today, and is quite shocking. Yeah, I can't say I had a good time with it, but it's kind of an interesting and disturbing movie. And also the whole thing of it all being done in one shot.
Well, if a lot of it's pitch black, that's probably where they have done their cuts.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the majority, it's the last 10 or 15 minutes is kind of outside at night time where you can barely see anything going on at all. Well, let's move on to the main feature. And I have a trailer here for Pete Walker's Frightmare, and I'll come in back after this.
Nasty, isn't it?
How did he get in there?
I put him in there.
You won't tell anyone, will you, Eddie? It'll be our secret, won't it? You won't tell.
Why did you let them?
After escaping a death sentence for her hideous crimes, a seemingly rehabilitated woman settles in an isolated farmhouse with her husband, only to ache once more for blood and a crash course in surgery. Is indeed her old self back? Yes, Pete Walker's Frightmare is a film that I've kind of got a kind of long history with. That it's probably one of my favourite British horror movies of the 1970s, and it was very different from a lot of horror movies coming out from the typical kind of Hammer type movies that were coming out in the 50s and the 1960s, and it doesn't have the kind of playfulness of the kind of Amicus movies that the anthologies that were coming out in the early 1970s. So this kind of feels almost like a not exactly a punk rock movie, but it's kind of proto-punk rock in so much it's very, very nihilistic, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not enjoyable. It's a fun, gory movie, but it's designed to shock and to gross out people, as Pete Walker said. So I've got quite a lot of background on this one, but it's kind of although there had been. Because the whole thing revolves around cannibalism, basically, and what you have Sheila Keefe as this kind of seemingly sweet old tarot reading old lady who is also a hideous cannibal who enjoys dispatching hapless victims with a power drill. You've got this. And then you've got the setup with her daughter, or two daughters, who one of them doesn't even know that her mother and father have come out of the asylum after where they've been sent after a trial in 1957, after they killed Andrew Sachs, who in the black and white prologue, who of course went on to be famous as Manuel in Fawlty Towers. And so you have this kind of you have the daughter who brings meat, which may or may not be human meat, but it's probably I think it turns out it's actually meat that she's got from the butchers, but pretending it's human meat to satiate her cannibalistic mother. But it's not enough, and then Sheila Keefe uses her tarot, which we heard in the beginning when she talks about the little animals that come to visit her, which just adds that kind of perfectly creepy, playful feel to this movie. And even though it's incredibly nihilistic and ends on an incredibly nihilistic note, which is kind of something that was kind of mirrored in a film like Eden Lake, which I know obviously Nathan hated with a passion, that end of that movie, and I'm going to be interested to see what Nathan thought of the end of this movie. But it's very, very British in a lot of ways, but it also has that kind of ultra-violence, especially for the time, which kind of mirrors something more like the films that were coming out of America, or Canada, like Death Weekend and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Although when I was looking at this and I was sort of thinking, well, what came first, Frightmare or Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Although they both were released in their respective countries in 1974, I don't think there was any. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't get released in the United Kingdom and London until 1976. So I think it was just complete coincidence. It's one of those funny coincidences. But it would have been in an ideal world, in another alternative reality, maybe there was Leatherface versus Sheila Keefe. I would have paid to see that. But yeah, it's a gory, shocking, fun, quirky, very British kind of movie, and also in the ways that it plays around with themes of psychiatry and being very anti-psychiatry. And Pete Walker's been accused of being a left-wing filmmaker and a right-wing filmmaker, and I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between. But I've got a book called Making Mischief by Steve Chibnall, which is about the career of Pete Walker, and I think the title's very apt, Making Mischief, and I think it is very much what he was doing with this movie. So yeah, it's big favourite. It's one of the films that I do often show friends and it's a perfect introduction to Pete Walker. And I think Pete Walker said himself that if for anyone, if he was going to show any film of his career to anyone to say this is what I did as a filmmaker, it would be Frightmare. So I think it's a nasty, playful little gem. So I'm looking forward to talking about it a bit more. But Nathan, did the ending of Frightmare trouble you?
It did, but probably in a good way. I think, like you said, one thing that Frightmare really has going for it that Eden Lake did not is that there is kind of a it's not a completely like depressing film or anything by any means. Whereas with Eden Lake, I just felt the whole movie's depressing until the very end, and then even more depressing. Whereas not necessarily with this movie, even though like you said, it does kind of end on a nihilistic note. But yeah, with Frightmare, I think it's an excellent film. I think Sheila Keefe is incredible as Dorothy in the movie. I love kind of like you said, the playfulness with the little animals, and then I just love the perhaps you'd like to tell me, and then she kind of just mocks her, perhaps you'd like to tell me, and then her voice gets real serious. He's like, perhaps I wouldn't. And I'm like, just stuff like that I find to be, really great in this film. I felt pretty bad for Jackie, but in all honesty, if you're having to bring raw meat, to your father and stepmother, I'm thinking, if you're having to bring raw meat to curb her urges, then she ain't cured.
Well, maybe she should eat some cured meats.
Ah, very clever.
But yeah, I'm like, I think that Jackie probably should have just washed her hands of this whole family. I don't know why she didn't. And ultimately, and spoiler alert, ultimately she pays for it in the end. But I thought the ending itself was very powerful, like with the dad, like blocking the door, even though he's not happy about what's about to happen. He's still like, I guess it's just a matter of he's made his choice. And he chose his wife and his daughter Debbie over his daughter Jackie. And Debbie was a brat, by the way. I thought that she was very bratty. I was like, but she is a teenager, so I probably got to give her some leeway with that. And she obviously has picked up on her mom's, cannibalism and murderous tendencies. So, there's that too. But yeah, the Frightmare in general, I think, is a fantastic movie. I think the drill scene was great. The scene with the fireplace poker was really good. And like I said, the ending is just it's like a tragic and really scary way to end the film. Although I have my own thoughts about what could have happened after the credits rolled, but
do you think they all just sat down and had a nice cup of tea?
Yeah, I think that Jackie probably was like, "Hey, let's all sit down, let's talk this out," and I think they were able to come to an understanding.
Maybe they said, Jackie said, Jackie's the good girl, is it? Or is it
yes.
Debbie? Yeah, Jackie said, cannibalism made baby Jesus cry. And then they all put down their weapons and go, we never thought about it that way. Sha-la-la-la.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
I was going to say, Pete Walker said that he'd always wanted to make a romantic comedy. So that would have been his chance to finish on maybe a song and dance number or something.
You have to admit, it would have been an unforgettable way to end the film.
It would have been. So thank you, Nathan. Anything else you want to tell us about? Is that your initial thoughts?
That's my initial thoughts.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask Erik, when did you change your name from Kim Butcher? There's a little bit of Debbie in you, isn't there?
No, there's not. I don't murder people.
No, but I can imagine you stropping around your house. You always say you're in your flat half naked, just like Debbie was in her knee-high socks and her little knickers. Yeah. So, Frightmare.
Yes. I do. I really like this one as well. The 1970s aesthetic of the look of 70s London that's captured in this film. Well, it's not London. It's supposed to be Surrey, isn't it? Which is where you're from. Justin.
It's partly filmed in London, but partly filmed. It's the kind of cottage is in Hazelmere, which is about 12 miles from where I grew up.
Okay, so yeah, because I think I read on Wikipedia or something that was set in Surrey, but I was then confused why everyone sounds like they're from EastEnders. They all have Cockney accents, which some of them sound quite over the top, which I think adds a slight comical tone to the film. I don't see it as a depressing film at all. I see it as very playful, and even though the ending is supposed to be downbeat, I love the way it sort of ends like on a Halloween 3 cliffhanger, where you don't really know what's going to happen, and it leaves you thinking. It leaves you thinking what happens after the credits, as Nathan was discussing there. It did remind me of 1970s British television in places, which is a good thing because it's kind of was the backdrop to my youth. Was I was born in 1974, so I have vague memories of the 70s. But a lot of 70s television would have been playing in the background, so this kind of hit a nostalgic nerve in me that I quite liked. I loved watching the sort of huge denim flares and the really deep shag carpets and the orange, painted interiors were great fun. It just really felt like a Bay City Rollers video or something at times, but a hagsploitation version of Bay City Rollers. The Sheila Keith, there's a bit in it where she really reminded me of the sisters from The House with the Laughing Windows. She had that kind of look about her. I love that sort of sinister / sweet. I'm going to say granny, but I was looking at the IMDb. I think she was only in her early to mid 50s when she made this, so she's hardly be considered a granny. Because I think we're all approaching that age at this stage, and we're not grandpas, I hope. I thought it took the cannibalism aspect of films like Deranged, probably more so than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it transplanted it into sort of suburban England, which I thought was, I suppose it made it more relatable to me. I mean, I was living in a small town in Ireland at the time, but it had a more of a sense of familiarity to me than maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre would have. The psycho granny wielding the power drill is quite the image. I thought it made a really fun poster for the movie as well. I love the way she's prefiguring Jason in Friday the 13th Part 3 with that red hot poker, although I'm not quite sure why the victim just stands there against the door waiting patiently for the killer to stab her in the stomach with the red hot poker. I would certainly be trying to escape by any means. And she doesn't seem to be in a huge amount of pain when she gets, her comeuppance, which I thought was quite odd, but fun. I thought the running time was a real lesson to the filmmakers behind Terrifier 2. This film is a slim 82 minutes. And it doesn't waste any time on superfluous subplots or, dragging things out needlessly. It's a very lean and linear film, and I love that about it. And I love the very slight implication of the supernatural, because I suppose it's implied that she does have psychic skills, because her tarot readings seem quite accurate. Unless she... Like when she's doing the tarot reading for Graham at the end, she seems to know a lot about him that's 100% true. But unless maybe Debbie has informed her or something, I'm not quite sure. But I love the film. I'm not usually familiar with Pete Walker's output. I've seen a few of his titles, but I can't remember much. I know I've seen The Comeback, House of Whipcord, and Flesh and Blood Show, but off the top of my head, I can't remember anything about them. So. I've always been more familiar with Norman J. Warren, who's a filmmaker I always sort of put into the same category as Pete Walker. So I must actually venture into his oeuvre once more and discover. Is Frightmare his best film, would you say, Justin? Or is there better in there? Because I loved Frightmare.
I would say Frightmare is his best film. Having said that, The Confessional Murders is a lot of fun. Sheila Keith's in that as well. And Schizo is one I need to kind of revisit. The Comeback has got a fantastic sequence with a killer running down the stairs dressed as an old hag with an axe, which is amazing. But it's a little bit it kind of goes off the rails a little bit, but there's still lots of stuff to enjoy in them. And also the Flesh and Blood Show is very much like pure proto slasher with boobs, because obviously Pete Walker also got his start in filmmaking with his kind of nudies and his sex comedies. And surprising, actually, this one is surprising that there's no nudity in this at all, is there?
Well, apart from Debbie in her knickers and knee-high socks.
Yeah, but yeah, no, interesting. I mean, it's definitely worth digging back into them, because I think there's a lot of fun. I think the Flesh and Blood Show was originally in 3D as well, so I wonder if that was.
Yes.
So I wonder if that'll ever come out in a 3D version. So okay, and is that you?
That's me done. Yeah,
you done
I love the film. Yeah,
excellent. Okay, thank you, Erik. So Joseph, what are your thoughts on Frightmare?
Oh, wow, this is awkward. You guys have touched on just about every talking point I had memorized. So I'll just touch on a few little things you didn't mention. And for me, Frightmare is full little things that I love, in addition to all those scenes of grandiose proto slasher murders. It's benign, maybe, but I love the opening credits with a pile of tarot cards stacking closer to the death reading. It's between flashes of the names on the screen. I thought that was a very nice touch, considering Sheila Keith's predilection for tarot cards. And speaking of Sheila Keith, I mean, she oscillates between wisdom and, complete madness. And when she turns on a dime at the behest of the plot, she has this eerie power to kind of terrify. I mean, I found her very frightening. And it's got that, like Erik said, it's got that wonderful early 70s atmosphere with lots of brown, beige, and every drab shade in between. And, in addition to some really shocking murders for the time period, there's a real menace to the buildup and the atmosphere and with the narrative. I mean, we know Sheila Keith's character is no good and is up to no good from the jump, but the film sort of, I don't know, it kind of toys with the notion that she may be a product of her environment and not completely off her rocker, even though, yes, she is. I mean, she has this sort of, like, I have to attitude about the murders rather than an I want to attitude. And those murders are really quite brutal. I mean, that fireplace poker beating, it really unnerved me in so much that we don't see anything explicit, and yet the way it's shot, we can feel the impact of it. And the same goes with that pitchfork murder late in the film, and I absolutely love the usage of shadows in that sequence leading up to the kill. Like a lot of the 70s proto-slashers, it's very deliberate with the character development and build-up. And Pete Walker probably does this conceit better than anyone from that time period. Like I said, you guys have touched on everything else. So, yeah, I love Frightmare and found it very, I don't know, it's very lush and warm, but it's kind of comforting, but in a very transcendent way, while also very frightening. It's really hard to explain. And that final shot, man, that was dark, so dark and kind of sad at the same time. So, thumbs enthusiastically up for this one, Justin. This was a great pick.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. I thought you probably would. So, let's move on to some backgrounds now. So, Nathan, what have you got for us?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. Erik, what about you?
Well, I also have that Making Mischief book that you referenced there, so this is where my background comes from, so it's probably going to double up what you had. But Pete Walker had assigned David McGillivray, who was his co-writer on a lot of his projects, to make something that would push the boundaries, and the idea they came up with was a film involving cannibalism, and McGillivray said that the main object was to be nastier than House of Whipcord, to invent sequences that would repulse the audience without totally alienating the censor. So the early working title for the film was Covered in Blood, which is very much a Snakes on a Plane, does what it says on the tin type of title. And McGillivray worked on it during the autumn of 1973. In spring 1974 is when they started shooting under the title Nightmare Farm with a not quite finished script, but they shot it over the course of 25 days and it then opened in December of 1974. Some of the reviews at the time, if you like this, have your brain examined, said Ian Christie from the Daily Express. We can all, I think, manage without Pete Walker's Frightmare, said Eric Shorter of the Daily Telegraph. Both ridiculous and nasty, said Hugh Herbert of The Guardian. And so there's lots of negative reviews. It was also criticised for its depiction of mental illness, for insinuating that it's hereditary, that if you are the child of a parent with mental illness, then you are going to be mentally ill and there's nothing you can do to stop it, is basically what they read into the film. They also said that it had a very sort of, I suppose, right-wing attitude to the reform of prisoners or the reform of the mentally ill. It says that Pete Walker is obviously saying that if you are incarcerated in a mental asylum, that's where you should stay because you can never be cured. Although Joseph says if they eat cured meat, maybe. The film that the hero and heroine go to see in the cinema is called Blowout, and it's not the De Palma one. It's a French movie also known as Le Grand Bouffe, which deals with a group of men who go to a villa in the French countryside where they resolve to eat themselves to death. So that was a sort of very ironic inclusion into the film. However, the dialogue that we hear when they're in the cinema is not from that film. It's actually from Pete Walker's previous film, which was House of Whipcord. Rupert Davis, this was his last feature film. He died in 1976 at the age of 60, but he was also in Dracula Has Risen from the Grave and Witchfinder General. Leo Genn, who plays Dr. Lytell, he was also in Lizard in a Woman's Skin, Die Screaming Marianne, which is a previous Pete Walker movie, and The Bloody Judge, which is a Jess Franco movie. And that's all I have, I think. And what YouTube is I just hit a button on my PC and YouTube started playing really loudly in my headphones. That's all I have, Justin. So...
Okay, well, thank you. I just mentioned, before I come on to you, Joseph, I forgot to mention Die Screaming Marianne with Suzanne George, which has got a fantastic title, but is a bit of a so-so thriller. It's not... It kind of... I remember watching it, and I think it's got a great opening sequence, but it's not one of his best. But Joseph, what do you have for us?
Nothing. Although I would be remiss if I didn't mention that that wonderful big box VHS of Sheila Keith holding the drill. Man, that thing used to terrify me back in the day on video store shelves. But no, I don't have any background.
I do love just one thing I forgot to mention is I do love the dream sequence where Jackie's on the train and she sees Sheila Keith in the corner with the sort of very pasty face and red eyes. I thought that was quite creepy.
That reminded me a bit like a kind of Woman in Black kind of look to her.
It did, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of, that's the, I think that's the image from the American, I don't know if it's the video box, if the one they use in UK as well, with Sheila Keith with the kind of painted image of her with the drill.
Yeah, but she's a little more pasty in the film than she is on the box. It's kind of funny, but yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, no worries. Well, there's a couple of other things that maybe you didn't mention, Erik, and I apologise if I repeat anything. But I kind of mentioned that Pete Walker was, he was a son of a comic, vaudeville comic, and a showgirl. And he did actually stand-up comedy when he was younger, and he financed all these movies. He talked about the other British horror sort of stables like Tygon and Hammer and Amicus. And he said that actually he was like a one-man show. He produced, he fundraised, and he directed all his own movies. So he didn't do any movies for anyone else apart from when he did House of Long Shadows, his last movie in 1982 or 83, for Canon, I think it was. So all the films he made were kind of really, he said it was more like business decisions. He's more of a businessman than a filmmaker, which is surprising at how well the films kind of play out. And he kind of started with films, kind of sexy schoolgirl movies, typical those kind of early 60s or mid 60s kind of movies, and then into sort of sex comedies like Call It Carol. And he said he moved into these kind of what he termed kind of terror pics because with the advent of kind of more there wasn't really hardcore movies in the UK because you couldn't have hardcore movies showing in the cinema, but those kind of sexy comedies from the late 60s that he was making kind of were a bit passé by that point. And he said that Hammer, again, was kind of a bit passé, and he kind of wanted to explore a more kind of, actually going to go for more of the jugular, which is why I kind of mentioned it was a bit more like proto-punk. It kind of had that kind of slightly anarchic feel to it. And as you mentioned, he worked with David McGillivray on this and came up the idea, or David McGillivray came up with the idea of cannibalism, which potentially was influenced by the kind of Andes, the incident with the Olympic team, wasn't it, who crashed in the Andes and ended up having to eat the corpses of some of their fellow team members, which was turned into a couple of movies, including Alive, I think, and I can't remember the name of the other one. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but there's fantastic movie Deathline from the year before about cannibals on the Underground in London. Have you guys seen that? And it's got Donald Pleasence in it.
Was that 73? I thought that was 71.
Or 70, it was, it came out, it was a year before he started working on this movie. So I'm not sure if he was influenced by that. But if you have not seen Deathline, and I think it was called Raw Meat in the United States, And I think it's got Donald Pleasance in it, hasn't it? I think, if memory serves me well. But yeah, that's a great sort of British horror movie set on the underground. Apparently the original script he came up with was the original idea was to have the daughter killing men and bringing their corpses to the cannibal mother. But they kind of changed it around to make Jackie more of an innocent, well, not necessarily innocent party, but more sympathetic. And originally they were going to set it at a fun fair. But the whole thing of fun fair and the opening sequence is in the black and white prologue is set at this fun fair, but it was cheaper to film in the farmhouse, and it kind of adds. I think the farmhouse adds that kind of weird kind of juxtaposition between sort of the cozy English farmhouse with the fire going in the open fire going, and the kind of the old lady wearing a shawl, and sort of with that kind of ultra violence is kind of quite a jarring juxtaposition. The term that the doctor uses for psychopathic cannibalism is I can't say this word, but it's carabanthropy or thropy, which is completely made up and isn't in any medical dictionary. As I mentioned, Hazelmere is 12 miles away from where I grew up in Guildford, and so back in 1975 I would have been probably eating Marmite soldiers while watching Jim Will Fix It. So, and Basil Brush.
Can't say his name.
I know. Well, I didn't say his name, did I? But, well, I did, I kind of guessed. But anyway, more innocent times perhaps back then. Pete Walker said, obviously they set out to make a shocking movie, and he said, whether it's true or not, he said the pregnant wife of one of the lighting cameramen threw up on set during a murder sequence. The only other thing I don't think you've mentioned, well, you mentioned about the negative press, that I think it's David McGilvray came up with the idea of, or one of them came up with the idea of actually using the negative comments on the poster for the movie to sort of try and sell it. And in fact, actually, one of the other actresses was not mentioned. She was quite popular at the time, but who plays Jackie's friend, Merle, played by Fiona Curzon. I found an old newspaper article where she was being interviewed about what she was doing, and they mentioned this film, and she kind of tried to distance herself from it, saying she was only in non-horror scenes, so didn't realise how gruesome and violent the movie was. But sadly, the film wasn't a great success. It made half the amount that House of Whipcord had made, but that was partly down to the because it's released just before Christmas 1974, and during a kind of a bombing campaign by the IRA in London, which apparently put off a lot of people from central London going out to cinema. So it meant the film wasn't nearly as successful, and probably didn't roll out to as much of the rest of Britain as it might have happened otherwise. But as I mentioned, Pete Walker says that he thinks this is his best film. And he followed it with House of Mortal Sin, or aka The Confessional Murders, which had a very similar approach, but taking aim at the Catholic Church. And that one has got Susan Penhaligon and I can't remember the name now. The one that was on the Colbys, or
Stephanie Beacham.
Yeah, Stephanie Beacham is in that, and that's definitely worth a watch. So if you have watched Frightmare for the first time, and have a taste for his movies, and Confessional Murders is kind of similar kind of feel to it, and includes a scene where the priest kills somebody with one of those instant burners on a rope or on a chain, which having been brought up Catholic, it obviously makes me very happy to see, or being very lapsed Catholic, makes me very happy to see priests doing terrible things. So
one actor we didn't mention actually is the opening victim is played by Andrew Sachs, who went on to play Manuel on Fawlty Towers in a kind of a racist role, I suppose, in retrospect.
Yeah, it was funny actually, just as an aside, living in Spain is apparently when they showed that here, they changed his character to being Portuguese. So
yeah, there's no love lost between the Spanish and the Portuguese, is there?
No. So, okay, right. Well, that was Frightmare. So hopefully, if you've not seen it, well, hopefully you have watched it ahead of us talking about it. And if you've enjoyed it, then do check out some of his other movies. And I'm sure we'll get round to those at some point soon. So, Joseph, what was the consensus? It seemed to get quite a lot of feedback on the Facebook page.
Not a whole lot. I mean, 23 comments overall for Frightmare. Ryan Clark writes a masterpiece. In my view, it's one of the very best horror films of the 70s. Sheila Keith was magnificent. And James Packman says, maybe controversially, not good. That is controversial because I love all of Pete Walker's films. But you can follow us on the book, the gram, and the twit. Join us on Patreon for exclusive access to bonus shows and fan commentaries. This month we're doing a commentary for another killer thriller with the Slumber Party Massacre. And our email address is all in the name, all one word, @gmail.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's see what kind of frights Eric's got for us this time.
It's my joke of the week. It's so freaking fantastic!
Why could Sheila Keith's character not use a large monkey native to West Central Africa to kill her victims? Because she's a lady, and that's a man drill.
Sorry, it's a very random sound effect because I can't actually see what I'm doing, so I had to randomly click on one. But
that was amazing, Justin. It made me laugh.
What, the side whistle?
Man drill.
Yes.
Was a wuzzle?
Well, Eric, here's the problem with that joke. It's a very complicated joke, and I've never heard of a mandrill, so...
It's a large monkey native to West Central Africa.
God, that's like the most convoluted joke you've ever told, Eric.
Well, I like to think I'm the Christopher Nolan of jokes. That was my tenet.
Is that because it went on for 4 hours?
And it was convoluted and worked on many, many levels.
Yes, okay. Right, well, we have some feedback, don't we, I think?
Oh, we do. We do. And this is from James Packman as well, how you just mentioned on the forums on the Facebook page. Now, let me see, where is it? Okay, here we go. This is from James. He says, "Hi from New Zealand. Enjoyed your recent open house episode, even though the movie itself is an abysmal mess. It was great to hear your recently seen in this episode, as they're all recent slashers or elements of slashers, and all from 2022. Pearl, Terrifier 2, Smile, Terror Train remake, all of which I have also seen very lately via other methods, as Terrifier 2 or Pearl never got shown on cinemas in this country." I don't know what other methods he's referring to. Would it be fair to say that 2022 is one of the strongest years in the slasher genre in recent times? A superb non-slasher film I'd recommend is Fall. As someone who is petrified of heights, the film almost did me in. Perhaps some films for your consideration for an episode is the French home invasion film Them, blatantly ripped off by the Americans and made into The Strangers, or the extremely tense and brutal Spanish film Kidnapped. Kind regards, James Packman. Kidnapped. Spanish film?
I'm not sure I've heard of it. Oh, okay, well, I've never heard of it, but if Nathan hates it, it must be bad.
It's basically Eden Lake.
Okay, well, I have no interest in anything like that, so...
Oh, I see. Here, I'm just Googled it here. It's 2010 it's from.
Yeah, we've mentioned Fall on Recently Seen in the past couple of episodes. And,
I loved Fall, yeah.
I think Justin may have picked them for one of our top threes, possibly.
I think it was
over on Patreon, yeah.
Over the 2006, wasn't it? I did. So I don't know, James may probably hadn't heard it by the time that came out. But is there anything else left for us to say? I'm trying to remember.
What are we covering next time?
Yeah, and sincere apologies for this. I was kind of scrambling around, like, what have we not picked yet? And the first thing that I saw on my shelf was, I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, because we did do we did commentaries for the 88 releases of I Know What You Did Last Summer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, with a fantastic box set which they put out, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? And we were invited to do a commentary for I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer, and we declined. So it'll be interesting. So we can actually really say what we think of it. And I haven't actually watched it since I saw it when it came out. So I know it is part of that 88 release, fantastic release of the 3 films. So I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing if watching it on a fantastic Blu-ray will make up for its shortcomings.
Make up for it being a bag of shite.
Well, you don't know, Eric, do you? You don't know yet.
No, we don't know.
Well, we do. No, we don't. But anyway, it'll be interesting to cover, and also, we can talk about in context of the other films and whether or not I'm kind of surprised. Well, of course, there was the TV show, wasn't there?
Which also got cancelled after the first season, and from what I hear, for good reason.
Yeah, well, it could be interesting to see whether or not that franchise is dead or if it's going to come back at any point. And given the boffo box office of the Scream, kind of the reigniting the Scream franchise, I'd be surprised if this one doesn't make a reappearance at some point. But anyway, it's regardless of how good the merits of how good the film is or how bad it is, it'll be a fun one to talk about and hopefully listen to. So join us next time on The Hysteria Continues. And what we're going to play out with, well, I thought long and hard about which Susan the Banshees song I could play out with, Eric, because I know how much you love them. So I'm going to go with Carousel from Peep Show, because obviously that starts at a fun fair, and I thought it was nicely fitting.
It tenuously fits. Absolutely tenuous.
Anyway.
Wow, it's like he's tenuous with his jokes and you're tenuous with your music choices.
I know.
I'm going to tenuously get the fuck out of here.
Well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Hysteria Continues. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
The paint box tunes and wild balloons.